So it's really important to look at flavor exposure, because in the end, there's somebody who's nodding at me. Thank you. Because it's the first chemosensory experience which fetus has, basically. And what we have found is when you look at other research on taste, you find that people kind of give something to the mothers and then they look at it after birth. So our studies are the first studies which actually look not only what happens when you give something to the mother and then what happens after birth, but actually what happens you give to the mother, and we do the ultrasound and see how does the fetus react. And then we follow that up at 3 to 4 weeks. And then we have got a smaller sample of babies who were followed up at 3 years old, okay, to show that basically potentially we can use it to educate mothers about what would be good to eat in pregnancy, because that enculturates the baby not only into their own food environment. So if you are in India, for example, you might be encultured into curry, and here you might potatoes, you know. But in the idea is that the babies or the fetuses will actually learn about bitter flavors, which are more vegetable kind of based flavors, which are then also healthier. And that might lead to hopefully some way towards reduction of the epidemic of obesity in the UK. So we did this longitudinal study, as I said. I mentioned the people before, like this was a PhD student, Beza, who is now in Holland, and Benoit Charles from France is involved, and Jackie Blissett from Birmingham, and Dema, who's the current PhD student. So lots of people were basically involved. So the first part of this study was the PhD. There were 2 groups of mothers who consumed either a single dose of kale or a single dose of carrot before an ultrasound at 32 weeks and 36 weeks gestation. And then we gave mothers these kind of kale and carrot capsules for the time until they gave birth to their babies. And then at 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we followed them up at home. And then at mean age 3 years, we did another follow-up of some of them. Now, in between, there was COVID. So we had a bit of a problem of recruiting enough of these fetuses, which we had seen pre-COVID, as babies. So it is a smaller sample. Here's a kind of setup. You have got like the experimental group, which either got kale or carrot, and they got around 400 milligrams of kale or carrot powder, which was controlled for calories. So it's a really very small amount, okay? And then we had the ultrasound scans at 32 weeks gestation, and then 36 weeks gestation, then fetal flavor exposure after the 36-week one until they gave birth. And then at 2 to 4 weeks, we gave them the odor test, where we actually had either kale or carrot odor, which we presented to them, as well as water, because we could, of course, not give any food. We couldn't give the... Yeah, so this was the experimental setup, as I said. And then mothers also completed questionnaires, because what we found in many of our ultrasound studies is that when the mother is stressed or depressed or anxious, that this has an effect on how fetuses move. And because we do movement analysis, we have to control for that. So we control always for these kind of variables. So here you can see a fetus who had experienced carrot capsules just 25 minutes before the scan. And then this is the scan which you can see of this fetus. Just a little clip. And you can see they open the mouth and seem to kind of actually take a taste. We analyzed all these movements frame by frame, and we did then relative frequencies of those movements. And then we kind of put together those movements into what we call a facial gestalt. And that shows either the kind of more positive facial gestalt versus the more negative one, although we never ever say that there is a hedonic association, because although this is kind of the nearest we get actually to say that the fetus might like or dislike something, we really don't yet know whether that's the case. So that's what we be careful about. But just look at this one here. Oh, this is a carrot again. And we have got 2D and 4D scans, so we can actually see whether they touch their mouths and things like that in 2D as well. And there you see it at 36 weeks, the same baby at 36 weeks, and you can kind of see there, which looks like a smiling face. Can you see that? Yeah. And there is the same baby after birth. So after they had their scan, we then visit them at home. And you see in the first one, there is a reaction to carrot smell. And there below, you can see the kind of grimacing to the kale smell. And that was a fetus. They were experiencing carrot in the womb at 32 and 36 weeks, and then for 3 weeks afterwards. And then after birth, they react like that to the carrot, okay? Now, as I said, we kind of also looked at maternal perceived stress and depression and anxiety, and we only found like one of the movements. We analyzed 17 movements. One of the movements seemed to be related to the fetal reactions, to maternal mental health, and that was like the lower lip depressor, which was associated with maternal stress responses. But because it was just one of these movements, it wasn't significant. And here you can just see a little bit what happens to a fetus when they, to the fetus and neonate when they get the smell. And you can see that even with kale, which is like a bitter tasting smell and taste, that at the beginning you kind of see here, it is kind of quite negative, you know, so the laughter face gestalt is very, very rarely seen. But after birth, so the neonates, they actually have got quite an increase to actually liking that taste. And here you can see with the carrot kind of fetuses, sorry, this one is the carrot, this one is the kale. So just to see here, like here, the scale is different. So it's quite high here, 0.40. So lots and lots of laughter gestalt, sorry for the carrot, even in the womb. Whereas here, it's very, very little for kale, okay? So you get much more grimacing to the kale and much more laughter gestalt to the carrot. But after birth, as you can see here, there's quite an increase even for the babies after birth to carrot. They really seem to like that. Whereas for kale, they also increase, okay? So even though it's a bitter kind of vegetable, which is not liked that much prenatally, after birth, these babies at 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they actually prefer that smell, okay? So what we then can say that looking at the repeated flavor exposure seems to have an effect on how much laughter gestalt these fetuses show, and it has to be matched to the prenatal odor. And then over time, the frequency of the cry face gestalt decreases. So our conclusion then was that through their developing sensory abilities, these fetuses are alert to aspects of their environment, and by swallowing and inhaling basically the amniotic fluid, they can sense the flavor which the mother eats. But as I said, like in the current literature, people only look at postnatal outcomes rather than actually looking what does the fetus do. And so we found with our fetuses that when they got kale, they were increasingly liking the kale in the prenatal period and then also in the postnatal period. And with carrot, they also increasingly liked the carrot flavor in the prenatal and postnatal period. If we, however, gave them the opposite in the postnatal period, so if we gave the babies at 3 to 4 weeks the smell of kale when they had experienced carrot, they were really grimacing. And when we gave them the smell of carrot, the kale babies, when we gave them the smell of carrot, they really didn't like it either. So it was a prenatal experience which made a difference to how these babies reacted postnatally. Okay, and it doesn't matter whether it's bitter or non-bitter, it was really what they had experienced. So familiarity to a flavor experienced prenatally is really important for the postnatal reactions to that flavor. So then we did a follow-up. We had around 12 children which we could actually follow up. And you can see here, they are like the fetuses at 32 weeks, 36 weeks. Then you can see the baby at 1 month and then at 3 years. And they do the smell test at 1 month and at 3 years, basically. And you can see that this child is quite happy with the kale smell. It's bitter and normally not liked, but he's quite happy with it. And here you can see the baby with the carrot smell. It doesn't like it, and he is very, very unsure about it as well. And then the next one here is the next. This is a carrot kind of baby. So you can see that's what I showed you before, like in the video, that they open the mouth. At 36 weeks is also quite happy. Then the baby here smelling the carrot at 1 month is happy. Here he is very happy to smell it at 3 years. But here you see the grimacing at 3 weeks. And here you see the kind of being really, really unsure about the smell when he is 3 years old. So it seems to be actually a really longitudinal kind of aspect of flavor learning, which you learn in the womb. And that's important. And that's important, basically, I think, for what we can do with mothers, with pregnant women. If we can actually tell them it's really important to give your baby the foods which are like vegetable based, you know, so bitter. And if the mothers don't like bitter foods themselves, they can actually take a capsule and you will get the reactions of the babies, who then will be less fussy when eating kale, for example. So the statistical results of the 3-year-olds, we're just doing the analysis, but just looking at upper lip razor, which is like when they really dislike something, okay? You can see it here with this baby, and you can see it there with the fetuses. That was actually significant to the non-matched stimulus. So if a carrot baby got kale, they showed more of that. And if a kale baby got carrot, they also showed more of this upper lip razor. So it actually shows that even postnatally at 3 years, which is really quite a long time, you get this kind of reaction, okay? Now, Peter Hepper did a study once with garlic, I think, and he gave like children garlic in mashed potatoes and non-garlic. And he kind of claimed that the babies, not the babies, they were children like 7, 8 years old, you know, that when they had experienced garlic prenatally, because the mothers were eating a lot of garlic, they would also prefer it postnatally. But he never had actually a real proof. So now we kind of show you the real proof of that. It's true, it's a longitudinal experience, and it seems that these babies actually do remember what they have eaten in the womb. So one of the studies has been published and the other one is at the moment under review. So what we would say that given these preliminary findings with the 3-year-olds, we can be therefore more confident in actually saying that it has important implications for flavor learning and memory of the flavor after birth. thank you very much for listening. I just want to tell you one thing. There was a girl actually who is now 4 years old. She went to a birthday party, and then when she came back, eating, of course, lots of chocolates and things like that. And when she came back, the mom told me, oh, she said, you know, I really need to eat some broccoli now, mom. Well, thank you very much. Do you have any questions?